G'day YouTube, warbles on a lot here. Those of you who've been watching my channel for a while will be familiar with my habit of sometimes using an atlas to illustrate a movie, and the fact that I've only had a little tiny atlas has limited the accuracy with which I could visually depict the images that I was striving for. Well, you're going to be happy to learn that I invested in a second-hand 2004 vintage Reader's Digest World Atlas. Ain't it a big one? So there's a definite sort of an improvement. For example, in my attempts to illustrate where the search is going on for the missing Malaysian's airline flight MH-370, this is the map I can use now compared to that one. It's approximately twice as useful. Coffee. Now, if anybody's been living under a rock, they may have missed the fact that we're now about day 39 or 40 into a search for a twin-engine passenger airliner which never arrived in Beijing after taking off from Kuala Lumpur. And the black boxes, the cockpit voice and instrument recorders, two separate boxes, they are set up for underwater operations with an acoustic pinger, little battery and something that goes ding, 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 ding with a particular frequency. Those batteries are good for 30 days. They're now day 40. Happily, just at the sort of day 30 to 35 or so, the Australian Navy managed to get some particularly believable location pings from what they believe are the two black boxes. So they've apparently, presumably, finally positioned themselves with GPS, and they know within 60,000 square kilometres where to tow their underwater vehicle or let their autonomous underwater vehicle go for a swim. But they say it's 4,000 metres deep, which is kind of right on the extreme limits for the vehicle. I'm still saying that there was a nosewheel fire, something which suddenly depressurised the cockpit and then replaced the breathable air with smoke. In the last 10 days or so since I made the last movie of mine on the subject, the biggest news was that the co-pilot's mobile phone, which he had disconnected as he was flying out into the South China Sea, while the aircraft was headed back towards Malaysia. And just to recap, aircraft took off from Kuala Lumpur, set out here into the South China Sea, suddenly, mysteriously, turned around and flew back over here. While it was en route from the turnaround position back towards the Malay Peninsula, the co-pilot's mobile phone made contact with a cell phone tower, but no call was issued. So I would say that was at the point where they were diving in the general direction of an airport, a runway on an island. They'd lost all their cockpit instruments, or they'd pulled the electrical connections, and they never got to make the phone call because they were overcome by the toxic fumes. After which the aircraft has wandered off somewhere into the Indian Ocean. I don't know how well you can see them, but this arc here is 1,500 kilometres from Perth. Further out there's a 1,500 mile from Perth arc. And across here is an arc representing the distance southwest that the aircraft flew from its last known position and direction. Out there on that arc is where the Australian Navy is currently looking for the black boxes. So I deduce. Now comes the interesting little bit of the synchronicity of it all. This marvellous atlas doesn't only show us the top of the Indian Ocean, but also, and at no extra cost, it shows us the floor of the Indian Ocean. And what we find is we have Australia, we have Perth, we have Perth Basin, we have Broken Ridge, we have 90 East Ridge, we have Investigator Ridge, and right there, pre-exactly where they're looking for the black boxes, we have Wharton Basin. So the answer is clear. By the serendipity of the synchronicity and the coincidence of the ideas of reference and delusions of grandeur. Because my name is on the map in the general direction and location where they're looking for the remains of the aircraft, obviously I must know what I'm speaking about. MH-370 is not in Perth Basin, is it? It's in Wharton Basin. So quickly, let's go and have a look in Wharton Basin. Well, here's a basin, and it's full of water, but there's no aeroplane in this basin. And if we look straight up, we can see that the sun is approaching the zenith. We see that it's 10:30 in the morning. So maybe this is Perth Basin. Maybe what we'll have to do is turn 90 degrees left and move off towards the setting of the sun. Oh yes, look at that. It's Wharton Basin. Just off to the west of Perth Basin. And in Wharton Basin there is in fact a sunken airliner. Ah, the synchronicity, the coincidence, the serendipity. Who would have thunk it? Wharton Basin and Perth Basin. And the missing aeroplane is in Wharton Basin. So there you go. It's in the book. The documents say I must be a recognised authority over what's happening in Wharton Basin. My name in official graffiti on the bathyscape. The landscape at the bottom of the ocean. What a shock. So if it's not a fire in the nose wheel well, I've got to come up with some alternative hypothesis because, you know, like my name's on the map, therefore I have to have some sort of an opinion on it. That's a joke, by the way. Here's my alternative theory. The wicked evil arch-capitalist, imperialist Colin Barnett, the Premier of Western Australia, he had to have something to do with the sharks that he's catching with his drumline campaign to eradicate sharkiness off the tourist traps on the Western Australian coastline. And these tourist traps are losing money because nobody can afford to go on holidays overseas any longer, so Western Australia's at the arse end of the long road from nowhere, and it's, yeah, there's not so many people going there. So in Western Australia they've decided the tourists have been frightened away by the sharks, therefore the politicians have used government money to catch sharks. That means they've got sharks that they don't really know what to do with. Colin Barnett smuggled a bucket of sharks on board the Malaysian Airlines Flight 370, and the sharks hijacked the aeroplane to come down and crash in the ocean off the coast of Perth so they could have a search and rescue led economic recovery. Because while ever they're out there looking for those black boxes, there's not a single empty motel room anywhere in Perth. The place is undergoing an economic revival with search aircraft from multiple nations and news crews from multiple nations covering the takeoffs and landings and the turnarounds and the exhausted, dejected crew who've been staring at the Indian Ocean for hours on end. There you go. By the synchronicity and the serendipity of the coincidence. It is written. The aeroplane is in Wharton Basin. This much, at least, is indisputable. Therefore, red is prettier than green, And Tony Abbott is about to legislate to make pi equal to 3 because Liberal National Party members' children just can't get their head around 22 divided by 7. It'll make the maths easier for them while they're moving onward and upward and profitably conquering the world. Ciao.